My name is Teresa Moulton, and I'm the editor-in-chief of the Change Management Review. Today we've got a presentation about selling the need for change management within your organization, teed up, and I'm going to begin that presentation right now. In today's presentation, we're going to talk about three objectives. One is that we're going to provide some insights into the need for change management. The second is that we're going to better understand how to optimize your change management selling opportunities. And the third is we really want to talk about how to plan for change management selling success. So today we're going to spend a quick 2 minutes on the human being, and then we'll spend a lot more time on the human doing. When we talk about the human being, we're really talking about giving ourselves permission to actually sell. And in this presentation, I am going to use the word sell, I'll use the word client, and I'll use the word prospect. But the reason that I'm using this terminology is, first of all, I want us all to get comfortable with it. And second of all, I really want to make sure that we're paying attention to the fact that it's okay to actually sell in our role as a change manager. If you take a peek at this framework here, you can see that from low to high, we have the level of positive intent on the y-axis, and on the x-axis, we have low to high, the level of partnership versus acting on others. And I just like to posit that we're really talking about persuading, influencing, and selling. And that has both a dynamic behavioral component to it as well as a strategic planning component to it. And today we're going to spend most of our time on the strategic planning component of selling the need for change management, but I wanted to at least raise this for you. If you're interested in reading more on this, you can go to our website at changemanagementreview.com, and there is a freemium that talks more about embracing the selling role into your change management work. Okay, so the human doing, we're talking about change management selling, and what does that really mean? It means that we're partnering with a client to set the context for ideas and actions to facilitate choice. And that's really key, because no matter how good our presentation is, how much work we've done in advance, the number of people that we're actually presenting to, or how many conversations we have, we're really about facilitating choice, because as we all know as change management professionals, if we are facilitating choice, we're increasing engagement and buy-in. We're also about persuading others to act or think in a way that is authentic to them. And I think this is starting to go down the path of authenticity as well as holding positive intent. And if we're doing those two things, then it should make us more comfortable with the concept that in change management, we do need to influence, we do need to persuade, and we do need to sell. Okay, so why is selling the need for change management so hard? And we say, look out for Jim, he's a fast-talking change management professional. Well, it can be really difficult because in order to make a sale, it's easier to sell a tangible product than an intangible product. So when I started out in my first sales profession, I was selling life insurance. So I was learning how to sell an intangible product to people. And the key to doing that in life insurance is education, but it's also about using emotional connection to create the motivation to act. In change management, it's a little bit of each of those, but we're going to talk about how to actually do that in a way where you're helping people make a choice, you're helping people actually decide what's important for the organization, and you're helping them to achieve their goals. Okay, so there's three different types of selling approaches. There's probably many more, but I'm gonna talk about three today. The first one you've probably become really familiar with, which is the formal or traditional process. This is where all the suits come to the table. You conduct introductions at the beginning of the meeting, you engage in some nice chat, we go through the presentation jam, and then you ask for the sale. And then you go back to the presentation and you ask for the sale. And I think that when you're actually in this cycle, it really doesn't leave a lot of room for anything else. So the other aspect of it is called the request for proposal, and we're not going to talk about this as much today, but we are going to talk about relationship-based trusted advisor and the process of actually doing the homework so that you have one meeting at a time to build up into a relationship so the sale actually closes itself. So the RFP we're going to leave on the table. That's not going to be coming with us through this presentation. So we have to have an iceberg because we're a change management or crowd here. And I think what's important is that we need to remember when we're selling change, we're asking the audience to buy the concept that the service we're providing or the capability that we want to build can be a tangible and powerful asset in the work of the organization. So we're actually asking them to trust that this thing they can't see, touch, or feel is actually going to add value to what the organization's goals and strategies are. We're saying business disruption in today's world ensures that any change has a depth to it that we can't see, and we need to have the capacity and capability on board if we're going to achieve our strategic goals. We're raising the flag to say, don't underestimate the power of erratic project momentum, a culture that resists change, changes in work practices, and taking a laissez-faire approach to change itself. So when we show up at a presentation or we show up to talk with someone about change, we're bringing all aspects of the iceberg to bear. We're basically saying to them, we're going to be able to help you deal with what you can't see under this iceberg that may come up over time on the project. We're going to help them deal with unfreezing the organization in its current state, making some change, and then helping them actually freeze it back up into a future state of adoption. And when I start to talk about and think about selling the need for change management, the first thing that comes to mind is everyone's core change management sales slides. These have been around for the past, I don't know how many years, but definitely 25 to 30 years. And they typically go like this. There's at least 5 of them that have this information represented. What is change management? So we help educate the audience. What is change management needed for project success? Why is it needed for project success? What happens if you don't have change management? Results you can expect to see early on, mid-project, and at project completion. And how do you start implementing change management? These are great slides. We still need them, but we need many more than these in terms of strategies and concepts and work that we need to do before we even show up and show these slides. Most of the times when we're asked to present or convince someone or a group of someone's that they need our expertise or change management expertise, we start with the assumption that they're not going to get it, or I need to educate them on what change management is. And sometimes that's true, and other times we underestimate the knowledge and experience of our audience, which can result in boredom and frustration at the sales table. Sometimes we cram our information together, focusing only on the solution we're providing to the problem a prospect doesn't even know they may need to solve. And so we keep presenting these slides, making sure they understand what's going on and what this change management is, in hopes of teeing up a gap that we can sell to so that they will take action and support our project moving forward. So here's just a little chuckle from everybody's change management slides. I'm sure you all have some version of this somewhere. So what is change management? And then, of course, you have to have a curve. And here, you obviously are helping them understand the process we're taking the organization through and help them self-identify with where they are on the curve. You have the traditional, what is the impact of change management on performance slide. We have the takeaway, or the consequences of not managing change. This is what happens if you leave it alone. And then we have my favorite slide, and this is the value slide for attending the presentation today, because this slide is over 20 years old, and it's actually based on a real study and provides 9 reasons that change efforts fail. Now, there's a big controversy out there, as you know, between some of the pundits in change management about whether the 70% change management projects fail terminology is accurate or not. I would say that these 9 reasons that change efforts fail are probably still true in different proportions. And the fact that it is 20 years later, we have organizational learning and comfort with how actually to succeed on projects in many different ways with new methodologies. So those numbers aren't probably as accurate as we may say. But that's just based on my opinion, and this is what I used when I was selling change management in my organization. Okay, then you have your change management is a comprehensive work approach slide. So here it is as a capability. So we've got to take that idea of what change management is as an intangible, and we've got to make it tangible so that people can see this turns into actual project work. Now you'll probably notice here that there's some extra things tagged on here that my firm actually provided in our service portfolio. But again, we're taking the actual intangible, and you probably have a model within your organization that you use. And typically after this one comes up, you see the Gantt chart. I didn't put a Gantt chart in here, but you see the Gantt chart. How are we actually going to get this work done? What are the components of the work? What's the project logic for doing the work? What are the resource requirements? You know, and you're helping to actually set the stage for selling change management work or selling the need for having change management. And I'll get more specific with that in a few minutes. So I have this slide here just to say that there is another way to address the challenge of selling the need for change management in your organization. There are questions like, do you really understand what you are selling? Do you even need a presentation? Are the next steps to socialize the concept prior to teeing up the conversation? Have you thought about your desired outcomes and what you'll do if you don't achieve them as and when expected? Do you really know enough about who is making the decisions? Are you really looking to educate your prospect without asking them to take action? So as we look at how we actually are selling the need for change management in our organization, we need to realize that the path to success is pre-work. If any of you just sighed and thought, oh no, this is going to be boring, then you should definitely pay attention, because that's the same thing I did when I was learning how to sell. I saw the process for preparation for selling, and I thought, oh my gosh, I do not want to sit through this. And in the reality of it is that if I don't go through this process when I'm selling doing a presentation or trying to express the reasons why change management is necessary, then I really limit my conversational flexibility, my ability to really answer any question that comes up, my ability to really understand the perspectives for those whom I'm presenting to. So I'd encourage you to hang on and pay attention, because we're going to start applying this directly to the need for selling change management. I've taken and written many sales courses, and every time an audience gets to this pre-work, they start thinking about something else. Pre-work is the foundation of your sales strategy and approach. There are assumptions you are making about what you are selling and to whom you are selling that you may not have thought about yet, or you may get a different perspective about. Pre-work of this nature builds your conversational flexibility, and it gives you the preparation that you need to read the politics and some of the subtle dynamics in conversations versus just worrying about, is this presentation completed? You know, are they getting the slides? Do people really know what I'm talking about? So the key to success is really to become practiced so that you are consciously competent in both the dynamics and the content of what change management means to your organization. So let's talk about what you're selling. So when we talk about change management selling and selling the need for change management, we're really talking about taking some of these benefits and turning them into specific examples of how these benefits will show up in an organization. So you could be selling adoption of new ways of working. You could be selling a concept to put in a new internal change management organization. You could be selling an opportunity to make a project more effective. You could be selling the importance of change management in the organization. That's a sale as well. And remember, getting buy-in is a sale. So everything that we talk about is to facilitate a choice and to help people understand that what they are actually agreeing to can become a tangible benefit. We might be selling a work practice or method. We've heard a lot about agile change management. We've heard a lot about lean change management. So there may be a work practice or method that we want to introduce to the organization. We could be selling project work. So we have to, get some change management resources for this project in order to increase its probability of success. You're always selling yourself. And sometimes we're just selling another meeting. One of the things that I do when I think about going into a presentation to talk about selling change management is I realize that there is a win in selling another meeting. That's my worst case scenario, is if I can create enough curiosity and enough questions for people to really get interested and I can get another meeting, then I will have an opportunity to revisit the conversation again. So again, what are we selling? We're selling, the meaning of these words. We're not necessarily selling the words. So lean change management, agile change management, enterprise-wide change management capability, internal change management group. Those are all things that we as change management professionals really understand, and those are the hot topics in our profession today. So we go to a change management conference, we come back with this verbiage, and we expect the rest of the organization to understand what it is. And I would say that in a lot of cases, it's really important to not depend on that verbiage and to be able to describe what the meaning is of the words. So a need for an enterprise-wide change management capability is really ensuring that the entire organization builds the capability and capacity to manage the change. That's what people are going to understand when you're speaking with them about whatever your change management need is regarding enterprise-wide capability. The need for an internal change management organization is really just a way to organize and standardize how and who does the change management work. So again, when you talk to people about change management, talk about the results that we're going to be getting, talk about actually what the meaning of the words is. When we talk about the need for change management work on a project, we're really talking about potentially one of many things, but increased probability of project success by investing up front. So when we start to even try to sell something as small as attending a change management conference, we're talking about comprehensive professional development, ensuring that the organization has access to industry practices and solutions. And I think you can see how this goes here. Then if we're talking about the need to distribute change management into each business unit, we're really talking about providing each business unit with the ability to ensure that priority projects are resourced for success. So when we move forward and we continue our planning, we really need to start thinking about to whom are we selling. And again, this can be very simple, but what I experience with most of my clients is that people really head towards the presentation. They focus on making sure that people understand what change management is versus helping them to solve the problem that the organization is facing. So you may be presenting to an executive team, which will have a different approach for planning your presentation than one senior executive. You might be presenting to your change partner network, or you might be presenting to a key stakeholder group. But what's important is to really pay attention to what is the level of change management understanding that each of these potential audiences has. So do they really already understand it? Because if they do, then you don't need to go back to your core slides. You can focus on what the problem is and how you're going to help them solve it. Has this group of people had positive experiences with change management? If they've had a positive experience with change management, you don't need to sell it as hard in terms of helping to explain it. Have they had negative experience with change management? If they've had negative experiences, that's where it becomes a little more challenging, but then you need to plan your presentation so that you're focusing on the benefits that will motivate that person to act despite their concerns around the negative experiences they've had. One of the things that I find is that change management conversations often focus on the slides, on why they need it, why we need it, what it's going to do for us, how it's going to help the organization. But we also don't take the time sometimes to think about the person that we're presenting to. They have a degree of reputation risk at stake for moving forward with any type of project. And it's important for us to really understand what we're asking them to do. And sometimes having that perspective can really help you use change management coaching skills to really tease out what's going on for them in considering this project. What do they think could get in the way? What do they think needs to happen in order for it to be successful? What's the smallest step they think they can take forward now? If this whole thing could be done within 3 months, what would that look like? Okay. And then I think the next piece that we really need to think about is, what is our level of perceived urgency? So when we talk to the client, our own perceived level of urgency for getting this work to happen right away is different perhaps than the people who are making the decision on getting this work to happen. So how do we actually have a conversation about making this work happen and getting them to share in our level of urgency? That's one that I think people sometimes don't understand, and sometimes that can actually jeopardize the conversation, because people will feel like they're getting pushed too much, or they may feel like the consultant, whether you're internal or external, is actually too slow. And I don't know how many of you may have experienced a consultant that is too slow, but that can actually happen, and that isn't a credibility builder. So one of the points I wanted to make here is that you can actually use your traditional change curve to kind of proxy for a sales process. So when you're talking about, the question, where are they? Where is your audience on this change curve? Do they need to be made aware of what change management actually is? What are their self-concerns about taking on a project with change management with a budget of, $1 million just for change management work? What's getting in the way of them moving forward on the next step in the presentation? And what do they need to understand in order to be able to sell it to someone else? So I just share this with you as a way to use something that you have already in your toolbox. Now we come to the second step in the pre-work, and we start to say, okay, can they buy what we're selling, right? So we know that we either want an enterprise change management approach or capability sold in. We want an internal change management group approved. We want a project to have a really hefty change management budget so that it can be as successful as possible. We know that we want to attend the conference so we can stay current. But are we presenting to the right people? Are we really, have we thought about, do these people have the authority to actually make the sale, close the deal? So for example, if you're selling change management, and it may show up as you actually preparing your boss to go to an executive meeting to present the need for change management, if you're selling through somebody else, we need to step back and take another look and say, okay, what does my boss need to have in place in order for him or her to feel comfortable to bring this concept to the table? And by the way, when they go to the table, are the people at the table going to have the budget? Do they have the authority? Can they actually approve the smallest next step that we could take to move the deal forward? It might, and it's a deal even if it's an internal presentation about getting budget, or if it's an internal presentation about setting up an internal consulting group, because the sale really is, what's the next step that we can do in order to start creating momentum on this work. And I think it's important to understand who the person that you're interacting with is in your sales process, because one of the things that we advise our clients a lot about is the fact that they might need to socialize concepts in the organization before they sit down and actually have the sales discussion. And again, I'm using sales terminology here, but if people ask you, what is change management? Why do I need it? Or, it's like advertising. In a down economy, it gets cut. Or my previous clients that say, I don't want change management. We don't use the word change around here. I let them think it's training. So are these people in the sales process people who have enough knowledge about what change management is and its importance in order to help you make your case for change? So how and where will you have this discussion? Often, again, these can be very obvious slides and concepts, but we don't slow down enough to ask ourselves the question, is this going to be one conversation and presentation? Have you just been pulled in the day before to do the presentation, so you're in the hot seat, or this is going to be off the cuff? Because in that case, sometimes less is more. Sometimes it's more important to bring 5 slides or not bring any slides at all and ask the right questions. Is it a group presentation? Is it a socialized set of discussions? When we start talking about our approach to building a trusted advisor selling relationship, that's the one that actually has the most success. Because what happens is, in the traditional and formal selling processes, nobody ever really talks about all the work that happened before the meeting actually took place. So here's my, I think, probably one of the most important slides of the whole presentation, because I'm giving you context and strategy and insights, things to remember or reconsider when you're thinking about having a conversation about change management. But now we also really need to pay attention to the meat, right? So the meat tends to be, what are the actual benefits that you can receive from investing in change management? And I call them conversational levers. So if we're talking about conversation levers, these are the generic flavors of them, and I'm sure you're familiar with many of these. So if you support change management, you have the potential for an increased project return on investment. You have a chance to be better aligned with the company's strategic goals and objectives. You might even realize the benefits and achieve the strategic goals and objectives. Your implementation will have no noise on go live. That's what we used to sell in our company. We used to sell not just that change management has all these project capabilities like communication and training, sponsorship support, and employee engagement, but we used to sell the end result, because as you can see here, the project vision of possibility, that's really what you need to bring to the table. So it pays to have actually thought about, what are the benefits? What is the future state that is possible for this organization when we actually invest in this change management? And here's why. Because at the table, one of the things that people don't pay attention to the most is their own affect, your own confidence level, your own ability to articulate. And if you have defined the project vision of possibility for an enterprise-wide change capability, then you actually have stepped into the future state of what it would be like at your organization if there was a capability that was able to be leveraged across the company. Business units would be able to resource their own projects potentially. Everybody would be using the same language and same methodology. The training might be standardized. There'd be less of a reliance on consulting outside the company. So you're stepping into that. So when you go to the table to actually have a conversation, you'll be able to dance with the questions that come up, and that will come through in how you're received and perceived. So no noise on go live. Sometimes I'll see presentations to sell change management, and they'll leave the benefits at this level of description. So in reality, you could pull this out of a book or take a snapshot off the screen of this presentation and use this in your presentation, but it's not going to really make the most sense or have the most impact on your audience unless you translate it into specific, tangible application that a person can actually see and feel at your company. So it has to be translated. So for example, instead of only stating that change management helps to reduce rework and reintegration efforts, state that, quote unquote, whoever the most resistant stakeholder group is, will clearly understand what and why their work is changing from X to Y, because we'll be supporting them throughout the duration of the project on a one-on-one basis. So take it to the next level. Apply whatever the concept is here for a benefit to the example of how it will show up in your company. Instead of saying this is an opportunity to raise company confidence in strategic initiative implementation, consider stating that unlike the XYZ project that struggled along, we're going to brand this project and get everyone involved so they feel great about their contribution and can see how they added value to the end result. So those are just a couple of things to consider. I do want to take a minute here just to point out the last bullet and the third to last bullet. So one of the things that is often not considered when selling the need for change management in an organization is, again, who are you selling to, and is this project or this work that we're proposing or this new organization that we're suggesting, is this providing them with a political opportunity to advance or build their organizational reputation? So, you know, as we're familiar working with sponsors, we know that in order to engage a sponsor, we have to be very clear on where their position is, what their level of influence is, what the power dynamic is surrounding them, how we interact with that. And I just raise this because if we're asking somebody who has to take too much political risk or isn't set up for success to champion this project forward, often people will say, oh, well, we're just not going to get it done because they don't have any influence, or our sponsor just doesn't have enough influence. And I would say maybe that's the case, but maybe there's an opportunity to build in a stronger component of sponsorship support so that person can benefit from an improvement in their political reputation so that they can point to this project completion as a successful leadership development opportunity. Sometimes as change management professionals, we don't realize that senior executives are often put on projects to prove themselves. And we may not be told that up front because we're not involved with their intimate coaching relationships. But if that's the case, it really does bear on what we can ask them to do. So again, I also think people don't think about what are their desired results. So assuming this presentation goes well, or assuming we get the go-ahead to build an internal change management organization, what does that look like? If we don't get to do it, what does that look like? Is it the status quo that we're talking about, or are we actually going to start seeing results in our projects go down because we don't have the resources that we need to actually make the projects more successful as a portfolio? And just thinking through some of these things ahead of time, planning the conversation out. What is the worst case scenario for your conversation or presentation? And what's the probability that outcome will occur? Sometimes that can relieve stress. It also helps to really understand what the smallest outcome you can achieve in a conversation is. So if you're just taking people through an educational process on this is what change management is, and here are some of the things that you can do in your organization to start moving towards building that capability, then that's a different conversation than actually getting the sale done in terms of action. So if we really start to look at selling within an organization, we're talking about, you know, taking the time to do some of the thinking up front so that you're aware of the dynamics, you're aware of the benefits that you really want to articulate in terms of the company itself, and to make sure that you're really paying attention to the environment and the situation around you as you go through this process. And I don't think it's rocket science. It's just that this type of work doesn't usually get done. And when I started doing sales training to be an insurance rep, I do admit that, even though my family at company parties was not happy about it, let's say in my early 20s, I really did not want to do the pre-work. In fact, I wanted to blow it off. It looked like a whole bunch of, BS. And if I just learned the product and I just talk to the people, then what happens happens and it should be fine. I just want to help them do what's right for their family. But what ends up happening is you get in front of the person and you have your sales materials. So I had the John Hancock flashy materials and everything I needed, but I didn't have the story. I didn't have the story on how those materials could be related to the challenge that I had to create for someone to experience in order to buy life insurance. So I often use this phrase, sell to the gap. And that's really what we're doing in change management. When we're selling the need for change management, we have to think big and sell small. We have to have the vision of what the future is with the change management capability in place, whatever it may be, from a training class to a coaching assignment. And we need to be able to say, what is the smallest piece of work that I can get approved right now that starts moving me in that direction? And then lastly, when we start talking about change management, the change management need being one of it being intangible, it's important just to take a few seconds and say, okay, I'm presenting to Peter today. Peter is the head of operations. So what kind of language is Peter going to really relate to this in? How can I take some of these conversational levers in selling change management and interpret those into language that Peter's going to understand? So again, not rocket science. I know you guys are all professionals and have been working, probably quite a bit in your careers. But these are some of the things we rush by. And even if you pull out one or two things to think about going into your next presentation, I think that it will make a difference in how you feel about yourself when presenting the information, as well as how you're received. And those two things really, add up to be usually a third of the sale. So without further ado, I have 3 tips for you. Basically, if your pre-work is accurate and the delivery is only adequate, I'm not talking like rock star delivery, I'm talking about adequate, the sale should close itself. There shouldn't be a need for any type of takeaway or motivational pressure, anything like that. And in organizations, typically if we're at the table and it's a predestined meeting, we're going in with a presentation to a group of people who's been hopefully seasoned at least to receive the information. But if you do your pre-work and you really understand what motivates this group to take action, then you're going to be able to put your information in the context of what has the most meaning for them. And I would also say resist your urge to solve. The prospect needs to solve the puzzle, not you. So that's our ability as a change coach or a change professional to hold that vision of possibility, hold the big picture for them, and let them discover, how they can benefit from putting whatever you're selling into place. And then when you're in doubt, just remind yourself of the smallest win that you can have in the conversation. And sometimes that's just the beginning of a relationship. And over time, you become the trusted advisor, and then you're not selling anymore, you're advising. So those are the 3 things that I would say to think about as you move forward. And if you come up with any others, please let us know. We're always building our content, so you can feel welcome to send me an email at teresa@changemanagementreview.com. I would like to take some questions. Okay, so if I am going to be selling to people in a different country, how does this information really apply to me? And that's an interesting question, because when we're selling to people in a different country, we're taking for granted, we could be taking for granted a lot of cultural implications. So in that case, it's probably the best to hook up with some people in your organization who can give you a flavor of what that's like, or do some research on, words that shouldn't be used or need to be steered away from. But in general, I think it really comes down to your audience preparation. And in the process that I presented here, we're also providing you with a free change management selling toolkit. So in the selling toolkit, there's actually an evaluation with questions to help you get to some of the to the bottom of some of that. Okay, so here's another question. Okay, so the question is, how do outside consultants think about change management? I don't think that having been an outside consultant more than I've been an inside consultant, I don't think that we think about change management much differently, but we look at it as a tool to help solve a challenge in an organization. So it usually comes down to, I think, how you might look at it internally. What do we need to get this project done well? How do we get some of the benefits of project success in place? And, is this a capability strategically that would really help our organization in reaching its strategic goals? And if so, then how can you actually build a methodology, take that skill set and enhance it so that it's available to your organization as needed? Let's see, what else? How do you move the needle with leadership on selling change? How do you build org capacity? How do you sell change management and yourself as a change manager? Looking for more opportunities to better crisply describe change management inside my organization. Okay, well, I think a lot of those things we covered in the presentation. And what's interesting to me is that there is actually a bunch of comments on, what words do you use to persuade? What are some of the phrases that are best utilized? And I would say, in that case, when you're talking about change, I think these conversational levers really make a difference, because again, the ticket isn't just to say, if you have change management on your project in your organization, you're going to increase your project ROIs. It's to actually apply that concept to your project. So if you have Project Compass and it's a ERP system implementation, and you know that it's supposed to take 9 months, well, you might be able to say, without change management, there's a risk that 30% of the project will have to be put in again. And then you can calculate what the cost is of 30% of the project budget, or 30% of the total number of salaries that are doing the work on that project that have to be reapplied. So there's ways to take these benefits and translate them into tangibles that make sense to your organization. So that's pretty much what I have for today. And I really want to ask you to, take the time to write to us. You can send me an email. Let me know what your thoughts are, what you're looking to do. And here you can see just a highlight of our future events. We have a virtual consulting clinic coming up in May with Daryl Connor, where Daryl is actually he's actually going to be doing live in-person consulting virtually. So people are going to come to his meeting and ask him questions, and he's going to solve real time. Now, he's doing this about character and presence and how do you master change management skill, but it's really going to be an interesting an interesting event to participate in. And then we're also having a Change Management Tools and Practices Virtual Summit in June. So we'll be getting out more information to you on that. I'm in the process of nailing down our keynote speaker, and she's wonderful, from the UK. And we will definitely keep you posted. So without further ado, I will close out the call, and thank you very much for your time, and definitely let us know how it went. Take care.